says, "These are also proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied out." Just as it said, and in fact, from Proverbs 25 through 29, verse 27, those 5 chapters make up the of the book of Proverbs. They are proverbs that were written by Solomon, but they were collected under the supervision of Hezekiah, king of Judah. And these were collected some 270 years after his death. And anybody know about how many proverbs that Solomon spoke according to Scripture? Any guesses? Bunch of them. That's a good guess, an accurate guess. Solomon, according to 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 32, tells us that Solomon spoke 3,000 proverbs. And even with Hezekiah's addition to what we have prior to, again, it still does not cover all of what Solomon spoke. And there's still a lot there that's not written down or that's contained in the book of Proverbs. And so King Hezekiah, who again, king of Judah, he reigned over a period of time for Israel when there was a great spiritual revival. And he added these chapters to the previous collection of Proverbs, and that having found these yet to be published Proverbs of Solomon. And the certain persons that he mentions here appointed by Hezekiah for that work, whether it was prophets such as Isaiah or Hosea or Micah, or even some others, it's neither evident really nor is it material, but undoubtedly that Hezekiah tasked somebody with writing these and including them with what we have, what was already written down. And so, again, know that this was ordered by King Hezekiah. So we move down into verse number 2, and we'll read down through verse 5. Said, "It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter. The heaven are height, and the earth for depth, and the heart of kings is unsearchable. Take away the dross from the silver, and there shall come forth a vessel for the finer. Take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne shall be established in righteousness." Here, I think it's interesting, the first thing that we find in verse number 2 is he says that it is the glory of God to conceal a matter. You know, there's a lot of mysteries in this world, are there not? A lot of things that we just can't figure out, and and some of those are spiritual, some of those are material, and so God has concealed many things, and yet this is one expression of His glory. It's one of God's ways to say that you're amazed by what you see, right? Think about all the things that we do see and that we are amazed by. I mean, to me, it's always when you go to especially the mountains just north of us are amazing, but when you go out west and see the mountains, especially in the northwest, and the Montanas and the Idahos and those places, those mountains are amazing. Really, just to see them and the vastness of them, and you go to other places and see the sights that we see, and it's just amazing. However, as amazed as we are by the things that we see, think about the things that we can't even begin to see, the things that we don't see that's concealed, and so he says it's the glory of kings to search out a matter. People are constantly searching out for those things that God has concealed, and this speaks to people's pursuit of mysteries in the spiritual world, but perhaps even more so to God's mysteries in the material world. When men and women seek out, there's constantly scientists trying to figure things out. I've never really understood how in the world somebody chooses that as a career. You basically start from nothing and you're trying to figure things out, and so they're trying to understand the mystery and the brilliance of what God has concealed in His creation. And they express an aspect of the glory of humanity, even the glory of kings, as Solomon said. And so the reality is you know what? Search on. It's okay. I think sometimes we as Christians get a little offended by those things, but I don't think, based on what Solomon says here, he says it's the glory of the honor of kings to search out a matter. It's okay to search. It's okay to search. But you have to also understand there's going to be things you're still not going to be able to understand, because unless God wants to reveal it, you're not going to get it. And so because what has to be the right and proper perspective in that searching is remembering that it is the glory of God to conceal a matter. And what I see amazes me, but God has even greater treasures of knowledge and wisdom that we're unable to see. And we should never think that, or be so arrogant, nor should anybody, to feel like that they can figure it all out, because none of us are ever going to get to that point. Nobody's ever going to figure it all out. And in fact, there was one of the commentators mentioned this. He said, this is a quote that he had. He said, it is the principle of all the triumphs of scientific investigations, and it is the deepest secret of all advance in spiritual strength. And again, we have to understand that we're not going to figure it all out, and that's what that quote is talking about. But then he shifts on and he says, so as the heart of kings is unsearchable. Again, it's the glory of kings, or the honor of kings, to search out a matter. But one thing that we often seem to have trouble with is sometimes searching our own hearts, right? And not only do we have trouble sometimes searching our own hearts, but guess what? We certainly can't search the hearts of others. We don't have that ability to do that, and such knowledge can be so far above us, like the heavens and above the earth, as he says, and yet, who does know the heart? God knows the heart, right? It's above our ability to search it out. It's above our ability to understand sometimes our own and especially others, but God knows all of them, and He knows the heart. He knows all about it, and so you move down, and he says, take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne shall be established in righteousness. And he references the removing the dross from the silver. What does that do for the silver? It refines it. It's a purification process. And so just like the dross being removed from the silver, so wicked counselors and associates should be removed from the presence of kings and rulers. And whenever that happens, their leadership will be established in righteousness. Verse number 6 and verse number 7. Put not forth thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men. For better it is that it be said unto thee, come up hither, than that thou shouldest be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. Here he's talking about our conduct, and he references a king, but I think this is applicable to all men and just our dealings with people. And just like we talked about this morning, we should always avoid self-exaltation. Avoid putting yourself up on a pedestal, or even as we should humble ourselves in the sight of the Lord, as James chapter 4, verse number 10 tells us, we should also humble ourselves before people, right? Before men, before others. And, when we do so, and here he references the king, he says, put not forth thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men. So make sure you humble yourself. Don't self-exalt yourself. He says, for it's better that it be said unto thee, come up hither. So it's better to be brought up from when you humble yourself. It's better to be brought up and lifted up to an exalted place by somebody else rather than to exalt yourself. And what does he say next? Then that thou shouldest be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. What is self-exaltation? Is an example of what? Pride. It's a form of pride. And so the Word of God says that pride goeth before the fall, or goeth before destruction. And so you can build yourself up, but it's going to be real embarrassing whenever you're brought lower, right? It's much better to humble yourself and to be lifted up by others. And, Luke chapter 14 and verses 8 through 11, Jesus kind of gave that same lesson. Whenever he, talked about it, he said, for whosoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whosoever humbles himself will be exalted, there in Luke chapter 14, verse 11. And so understand that, self-exaltation is still a form of pride, and we should be humble, not just in the presence of a king, not just in the presence of a God, but before all men. Verse number 8 through verse number 10. Go not forth hastily to strive, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof. When thy neighbor hath put thee to shame, debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another, lest he that heareth it put thee to shame, and thine infamy turn not away. So you go back to verse number 8, and he says, "Go not hastily to strive." What is that? This strive. We often think of conflict, right? But any idea what Solomon's really referring to here? Quarreling. How would something like that typically be resolved? Lawsuit, court. So Solomon's basically saying, listen, don't go hastily to court. This is not something that you should do. Listen, sometimes the court of law is necessary, right? There are occasions where that's all you can do. There's nothing else you can do. But we should never go hastily to court. We should try to resolve a dispute any other way. We should do it, if there's a possible way to do it another way, do it the other way without going to court. That was the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. In those first 8 verses, the Apostle Paul addresses that same issue. And so that was his teaching there to the Corinthians. It's obviously something that Solomon is addressing, and thinks that it's important to make note of that. And so he when you move on there in verse number the end of verse number 8, He says, when thy neighbor hath put thee to shame. He's giving a reason why you should not jump and run hastily to a court to settle something. Just to make it simple for you to understand what he's saying there when he says, lest your neighbor put you to shame, he's basically saying you might lose and be put to shame. Nobody wants to be on that end of things, and unfortunately, a lot of people, whenever they saddle up with a lawyer and an attorney or whatever, and they want to go to court for something, a lot of times folks have unrealistic expectations as to how the outcome's going to go and what they think is going to happen, and when they don't win, it brings shame to them, and it's just not good. And so he says, debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself. So, in other words, whoever you've got the problem with, try to resolve it with him. Try to, I have I say this anytime I'm in places, and it's my practice here as best I can as pastor. I've dealt with it in other places of leadership that I've been in and had. Keep small things small, right? A lot of the times people fuss over minute things, and they have problems with things that don't amount to a hill of beans, and yet they will make a mountain out of a molehill, right? And so it's best to keep things small. And if you've got a problem with somebody, if somebody's hurt you, if somebody's offended you, try to resolve it with that person. That's the best practice whatsoever. Don't just run to a court of law, as Solomon is talking about here. And if you can debate your case outside of court, do it there. And because what he says in the next part, he says it's best to do this with your neighbor outside of court. Because what's he say at the next part of that verse? And discover not a secret to another. Well, you take it to court, and I'm just going to be honest with you. Now, I honestly, you can't blame folks. Sometimes they put themselves in their own position. However, when two parties go to court, what do they both want to happen? They both want to win. And so when people feel like they are in that position where they must win, they're pulling out all stops, right? And so you have to be careful because if you don't debate it outside of court and try to handle it with that individual, then there may be other secrets that come out, right? And sometimes those secrets will bring us more shame than just losing. And because reality is, and maybe not, but probably most of us have some sort of skeletons in our closet that we like to stay there, right? I think about these poor politicians when they start to run for something, and it may have been something that happened 20 or 30 years ago that it's done, but I'm telling you, somebody somewhere, even stuff before social media, I can't imagine right now with social media the problems that causes people. This younger generation, when they start to run, Lord help them, because it's going to be bad. But you got folks that were doing things long before social media, but that still gets found out. Folks still dig, and they do, and I think unfortunately that's a part of it. And obviously it's not anything new, right? Because Solomon is offering wisdom and saying, listen, it's best to do it, because if you take it to court, you run hastily to court, not only might you lose and that bring you shame, but there might be some skeletons in the closet of yours that might come out, and that might hurt your reputation. What's that? That's right. For all have sinned. And so you just got to be careful. It just opens the door for more problems, and so I think it's definitely a lot of wisdom in that. I wish more people. Unfortunately, we live in a sue-happy society. And we live in a society where if you do somebody wrong and they think they can get $1 out of it, they're going to try to go get that $1 out of it. But anyway, it's always best to try to handle things and keep small things small. We move on to verse number 11. We'll read down through verse 12. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. As an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold, so is a wise reprover upon an obedient ear. I love that part of verse number 11, that a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold. There's the right words at the right times are absolutely powerful. So are the wrong words at the wrong time, right? But the right words at the right time, I think, they have not necessarily physical healing, but I tell you, you have a bad day, you have something rough going on, and let somebody say the right thing at the right time, and it can change how you feel, just like that. And I think that's what Solomon, it has power to heal, it has power to strengthen, it has power to guide, it has power to rescue, and he says it's like an apple made of gold set on a beautiful silver platter. Just a word fitly spoken. He moves on at the latter part of verse number 12, and he says, is a wise rebuker to an obedient ear. Sometimes a word fitly spoken is also can be a rebuke too, can't it? Anybody ever been corrected at a time where you needed to be corrected? Even if you didn't realize it, didn't think so maybe at that moment. Here's when the one who is a wise rebuker meets an obedient ear, it's a good thing. And that's the reference. He says it's like beautiful jewelry. It's like an earring of gold or an ornament of fine gold. Again, done in the right way. I think that's where, we hear that word rebuke, and the word rebuke is a harsh word. And the reality is sometimes none of us want to be rebuked. But the reality is there's times where all of us need to be rebuked, right? We all need to be brought into maybe there's something we need to correct, something we need to change in our life. And so we have to be open to that, but it has to be done the right way, in the right manner, in the right sense. And so, when that happens, whenever it's handled the right way, when it's approached the right way, and the person that's listening is willing to hear it and they're obedient to it, it's a good thing. And so there's two parts of that word fitly spoken. It can be positive things. It can even be a rebuke, which is not necessarily a positive thing, but it can be a positive thing. Amen. Verse 13, as the cold of snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to them that send him. For he refresheth the soul of his master. This is like the cold of snow in the time of harvest. This is a reference to or speaks of a cold drink that's cooled by the snow. Obviously, they didn't have refrigerators back then to run and grab a cold drink out of, or they didn't have an ice machine to go and get ice out of. And so, this is, this drink that's being cooled by the snow, given to somebody who's working hard in the time of harvest, is a refreshing thing. And the refreshing and invigorating nature of that cool drink illustrates the blessings of a faithful messenger to those who send him. And the faithful messenger is beloved by the one that sends the message. And can I tell you, God wants us to be faithful messengers. He wants us to be faithful messengers of his gospel and of his work. And he says that this refreshes the soul of his master. So the sender of the message is the one that's refreshed. and comfort in knowing that the message is being faithfully delivered. And I believe that God is pleased with His faithful messengers. When we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, I believe that it's pleasing and it brings pleasure to God. Verse number 14. Whoso boasteth himself of a false gift is like clouds and wind without rain. There's some people that want nothing in this world, right? But boy, do they like to be known as the one that gives. I've never understood it. I know sometimes they tug at the heartstrings, and you see videos of people going around and doing all these good deeds, and I'm thinking, why do you got to blast that all over the place? Reality is, I'll just be honest with you, if you don't know it, a lot of those people that make those videos that get those hundreds and thousands of views and likes and shares and all those other things, can I tell you what that does for the person that made that video? It just makes them, if they're already rich, it makes them more rich. And unfortunately, I look at that sometimes and I think, man, you're doing it at the expense of, of others that are less off, but nonetheless, this is what Solomon is talking about. That some give small gifts and want to be known as those who give great gifts. In fact, there's a prime example of that in the Bible. Somebody who gave a small gift, but they wanted to claim they gave a big gift. Anybody know who that might be? Two people. Ananias and Sapphira. That's exactly what they did in Acts chapter 5. And so, they want a reputation of being generous without actually being generous. He says it's like clouds and wind without rain. Whenever, I don't know about y'all, maybe some of y'all don't. I like storms. I'm weird like that, I know. I do. I'm intrigued by them. They amaze me. I love to watch a storm. I probably wouldn't tell this with guys that I've gone fishing with out on the Gulf before, but when you can sit there and watch that wall of rain start coming across there, I'm intrigued by just watching it. They're ready to fire the boat up and move, and I'm like, come on, let's watch this, see what this thing's gonna do. And so for folks like me, maybe not for everybody else, but when the clouds and the wind of a storm come, what do you expect them to do? I expect them to rain. So it's kind of a letdown when they don't, but the rain gives life, does it not? And so when the clouds and wind are without rain, it's a disappointment. And just like he who falsely boasts of giving is a disappointment. So verse number 15. By long forbearing is a prince persuaded, and a soft tongue breaketh the bone. So a long forbearance, a prince or a ruler is persuaded. Our self-control and patience can persuade great men to our cause, even a ruler. That's what Solomon's saying. You got to handle yourself in the right way. I think about situations in my life where I've dealt with things, and I had just to call it maybe what it is. I don't know. Maybe it's not. Kind of in somewhat of a situation like that right now, where there's some things that frustrate you, right? Some things you're not happy about, but you got to handle it the right way. And sometimes that being, patient. Sometimes that practicing self-control, not just telling people what you think and how you feel, and just letting them have it, but doing things in a way that show self-control, show patience, sometimes you're able to persuade people better doing that than you are if you just go and jump down their throat and tell them why they're wrong and how they need to fix this. And it's just something that we should practice. And again, even rulers, even folks that are above us, we're able to have that opportunity when you do those things, is what Solomon is saying. In fact, William Wilberforce persuaded the leaders of the British Empire to outlaw slavery through long forbearance and dedication to his righteous cause. And so it's not always easy, but it's something we should practice. And then he says that a gentle tongue or a soft tongue breaks a bone. Any thoughts on that? Yeah. It has the ability to, over a long period of time, it's going to have an impact. Such words, the patient and gentle words of a wise man or woman can have a great impact over that long period of time, and it does just that. It breaks down their resistance and maybe causes them to see things in a different light. And so, again, self-control, patience is important, and especially when it comes to the things we say, even when we're not happy with how things are. Verse 16, hast thou found honey? Verse 16, hast thou found honey? Eat so much as is sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomit it. I'd like to think I'd have found a better way to describe that, but, I don't know how y'all feel. I like honey. But, you can have too much of it. Too much of it ain't good for you, right? Basically, he says here at the start that if you've found honey, if you found something good, be careful. You should be enjoyed. However, you should only eat as much as you need of it. If something good is beyond what we need and we fill ourselves with it, then it can cause an unpleasant reaction, right? Even too much of a good thing is bad, and then the whole idea behind the vomit is you've just lost what you just got, what you just took in. You just lost the good thing that you had gained. And so overindulgence in good things can be harmful and counterproductive as well, as what Solomon is getting at there. Verse number 17. Withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house. Amen. Lest he be weary of thee and so hate thee. Self-explanatory right there. Neighbors visit neighbors, right? But don't overstay your welcome. Such hospitality should not be abused, and if it is, then they might become weary of you and not like you as much as they once did. I certainly like the way that Solomon worded that one better than I did the last proverb there that he gave. Verse 18 and verse 19. A man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow. Confidence in an unfaithful man in time of troubles is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. False witness, what is that? It's a liar. Whether in the court of law or conversation, when somebody speaks lies about somebody else, it does great damage, right? Solomon says that he's like a club or a sword or a sharp arrow, and it's not a. No matter what it is, let me just say this: no matter what that lie is, it doesn't matter. It's not a small sin against your neighbor. It's a major thing. It's a major problem, and and so he says it's like a bad tooth and a foot out of joint, and these verse 18 and verse 19 are connected because the man who bears false witness is often also the unfaithful man in time of trouble. And in one aspect he brings pain, the other aspect he is a pain, so is a broken tooth any good to you? No, it's useless. And so that's what he's talking about here, is the unfaithful man is useless, and really all that broken tooth is going to do is cause you pain, right? And so that's what he's talking about there. Verse number 20. As he that taketh away a garment in cold weather, and as vinegar upon nitre, so is he that singeth songs to an heavy heart. Some people and their actions are troublesome, right? They bring discomfort, which is what happens whenever you take a coat away from somebody when it's cold, right? That person's no longer going to be comfortable. And then vinegar on this nitrate, or is really what we refer to as soda, it's a constant agitation. It's never at rest. When you take and pour vinegar into a soda, a Coke, whatever, it's going to constantly agitate, and that's what he's referring to here whenever he talks about this. And so he says he also says is one who sings a song to a heavy heart. A lack of sensitivity is what he's talking about here. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that lack sensitivity. They're not sensitive to the needs of others, and they're not sensitive to what others are going through. It's only about them, and so whenever we lack that sensitivity, it brings discomfort. It brings the irritation of agitation, and I think that we have to make sure that we are mindful of those things, because again, we hear it all the time, but it's such a reality, and sometimes we're so inwardly focused that we lose sight of it. That you never know what somebody's going through, and so just be sensitive. If somebody's not themselves, instead of maybe you need to be mindful of that maybe they're going through something, and so just make sure that you pay close attention and show a little sensitivity in those times whenever folks might be going through things that maybe we don't even see or know about. Verse 21 and 22. If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat. If he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee. Here, I love the fact that it specifically says enemy, right? It's easy to give food and drink to your friend when they're hungry or when they're thirsty. But he says do it for your enemy. There's another place where this is mentioned, right? Anybody remember where and who? Matthew and Romans. Matthew chapter 5 and Romans chapter 12. And it's human nature teaches us, and that's one of the things that again sets Christianity apart. Christianity does not do what human nature says is natural to do. Because natural response to your enemy is to hate your enemy. Now, the Word of God says we're not to hate anybody, but especially even our enemy. And Paul quoted this specific proverb in Romans chapter 12, and I've struggled trying to grasp really the latter part of this. Whenever he says that to do so. He says that for thou shalt reap coals of fire upon his head. I don't know if that's a good thing or a harsh thing. If this is something good in the eyes of our enemies or not, but most likely, I would say, based on even the New Testament understanding of this, is that it would bring about a conviction to them, and that our kindness places on our enemy. So I think that we have to be mindful of that, because guess what? We are to be different, right? And if we're kind to even our enemy, I ain't got to like everything they do. I ain't got to agree with everything they do. I ain't got to eat at their table. There's nowhere where that's commanded in Scripture to do. But being kind is, right? Being, just it's different than anything. And so if nothing else, it's gonna cause them to think about this. Why in the world would that person do that? We're enemies. They don't like me and I don't like them. So why would they give me food to eat when I'm hungry? Why would they give me something to drink whenever I'm thirsty? And so I believe that heaping coals of fire on his head is referring to a conviction that will be brought about to that person. Verse number 23 says, "The north wind driveth away rain, so doth an angry countenance a backbiting tongue." Here, the north wind brings forth rain is an example of cause and effect. North wind blows, and what does it bring? It brings rain. Here, then he says that a backbiting tongue and an angry countenance. Those who speak ill of others with a backbiting tongue will provoke an angry countenance in others. That's cause and effect, is it not? Just like the north wind bringing forth the rain. And so we have to understand that when we do those things, there's consequences that are going to come with it. There's an effect that's going to take place. Verse number 24. I didn't put it there. It is better to dwell in the corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman and in a wide house. We've heard it quite a few times, haven't we, Brother Carl? Well, listen, when you consider Solomon's problem, was one of his problems was women, and he had plenty of them, and so he certainly reiterated that. Listen, the corner of the housetop ain't a great place to live, right? Small, confined. In this case, in this particular time, it could even be exposed to the elements. We don't think about that with ours, however, considering the circumstances, Solomon says it's better to live in the corner of the housetop, and so. Yeah, doghouse. He says that it's better to be there than in a house shared with a contentious woman, and to have the whole house. You have the whole house, but to live in constant conflict with a contentious woman, he says, is misery, is what he's talking about. And the same would be true of a contentious man, by the way. Just throw that out there. It doesn't matter. You'd be better off in a humbler living situation and have peace in the home. For again, Proverbs 21:9 is where this is repeated from. But verse 25, as cold waters to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. If you've ever been real thirsty, that drink of cold water is refreshing, isn't it? Here Solomon, this proverb is used in the same sense as most of the others, as a reference to the whole person and life, not only the inner spiritual aspect of a person, but he also says, so is good news from a far country. When you receive good news, it's refreshing, right? This is good news of many types, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. Doesn't matter what good news is just that. Good news is encouraging. It's refreshing. We hear enough bad news, don't we? So to start hearing, when you start hearing good news, then I don't know what it is, but we as a people, we're more prone to share bad news than we are good, and I think that is part of the problem that we have in this world that we live in. Verse 26. A righteous man falling down before the wicked is as a troubled fountain and a corrupt spring. Listen, the righteous are not exempt from falling, right? We're prone, or we're just as capable as anybody to stumble and fall, and when that happens, it's sad. But the worst part is when it happens before the wicked and the view. That's one of the things I look at, and it bothers me to no end. When I hear stories of pastors, and it gets put all over the news and all over the media, and everybody wants to put it out there because that's what Satan wants to happen. So listen, it's bad when anybody stumbles and falls. But what Solomon's saying is here is whenever it happens in the light where the wicked see it and they watch it and they know what's happened, it's a bad thing for sure. Because those people are already looking for anything, to cause them to they're looking for any excuse whatsoever to stay away from Christianity. And Solomon says it's like a murky spring or a polluted well. Instead of clarity and life-giving property of clean water, it does nothing. It does no good. It doesn't give life. It doesn't give clarity. It doesn't give refreshment. It doesn't give help. And so, I think that's why, we're encouraged a lot in the New Testament. Jesus encouraged his disciples. The Apostle Paul encouraged in his writings that we're to be blameless before men, right? That doesn't mean that we're without sin, but that means that we've got to guard ourselves in such a way that we don't pollute the waters, that people have hope and can see things in us that draw them to Christ, not push them away. Verse 27, it is not good to eat much honey. Man, Solomon must have really liked honey, right? He must have had some rough nights after he indulged in some honey. He says it's not good to eat much honey. And then he says, to search their own glory is not glory. Here, honey is an example of God's great gifts. And, in Solomon's days, sweets, they didn't have, cupcakes and all the different things that we have today. They didn't have honey buns. They didn't have They didn't have ice cream sandwiches or anything like that. And really, there was nothing that was sweeter than honey. And I don't know, I've had honey from Israel, and it's pretty good. And so I can see how one would overindulge. But again, overindulgence is not good, is what Solomon's saying. Self-control must be practiced even with good things. And then the second part of that, he says, search for their own glory is not glory. Glory can be a good thing, right? And it's a part of God's promise to the believer. However, when we seek our own glory, or it's not good. It's not glory at all. We should seek God's glory and not worry about our own glory. In other words, I don't want the praise. It's not about me. I'm not here to get glory for myself, and that should be our mindset in anything and everything that we do. I want to give God glory. I'm not out for my own glory, again, which is a pride issue. Verse 28, he that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. In other words, he who is without self-control, they have no rule over their own spirit, and the world and the flesh and the devil rule over those people. And he says that they're like a city that's broken down, that its walls are broken down. They don't have walls, and if a city specifically during this day didn't have walls, if they were broken or they didn't have them, what'd that make them? They're vulnerable. They were unprotected. They had no defense. And, that's what, they have no security. They have no stability. And, again, they're extremely vulnerable. And that's what Solomon is saying whenever he says that, the person that has no self-control, the person that has no rule over themselves, that's what they are. They're vulnerable. You got to have self-control, right? So, anybody have any thoughts, comments, or questions tonight?